move into this essential question of how to answer what are we going to get, when are we going to get it, and how much is it going to cost. Okay? That's really going to be the bulk of our discussion, and we're going to touch base on the rest because these are quite trivial beyond that point. Right? This is the hard part. So let's start with our first thing, which is creating backlogs. Okay? So as we create backlogs, the backlog is really trying to capture the desired work or functionality that we have. Okay? And what you want to know about the backlog is, if this were your system, your backlog is a set of these thin slice items, right? Has a little bit of the infrastructure, the code, the UI. It's an entire slice through the system. So you wouldn't find a backlog item that says build a database. Okay? You would find a backlog item that says view menu, right? Or select sandwich. Those are backlog items. So it's a functionality from the user's point of view. It is a valuable slice of functionality. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And that's really going back to our theme about value, value, value. Even our to-do list is value-based. Now, valuable to who is really important. Valuable to the customer or user, not to valuable to developers. Okay? So, the backlog represents one place to find a list of all the desired work for the project. It's ideally expressed so that each item has a value to the users, right? It's constantly prioritized by the value team or the product owner, whatever flavor you want to use. And it contains functional and non-functional work that the team needs to work on. So that's basically the backlog. Now,
create functional and non-functional. Can you unpack non-functional?
So performance requirements, for example.
Right, so the view menu, when you click select, it's got to achieve it. Yeah, okay.
So those aren't functional requirements. They're not. They call them non-functional.
Sure. I was trying to distinguish.
Security requirements.
Create a DB is to me also non-functional. So I was just trying to.
Yeah, this is more about performance issues and security issues.
Thank you.
And so forth. Yep. Here's an example of what typical specs of a system would look like, right? It says the product shall have a gasoline-powered engine. The product shall have 4 wheels. The product shall have a rubber tire mounted to each wheel. I mean, you're thinking of a car, right? You're thinking of a car here. And the reality is it may be something totally different. But this is the difference when we express the requirements as system attributes versus we express them as user goals. What you want to express are the goals of the user. That's why I like making sure people start the requirements with a verb, right? View menu, select sandwich, and so forth. Okay? Now, what we have inside of backlog is something we usually call user stories because it captures an interaction the user will have with the system. So it's a story about how the user will interact with the system. So, for example here, and this is a nice template to get started with, right, for user stories. It's quite popular. And remember, it's shoe level. There's others out there. Okay? So it says, as a type of user, I want to, or I can do something so that to achieve a certain business value. All right? So as an example here, as an online customer, I want to view the menu so that I can find out what food options Java++ has to offer. That would be a complete user story. Does that make sense? Okay? Now, you might ask, where's the details? Where are the details of this story? Now, the whole point of having a user story is we call it a contract to communicate. It's a promise between the business and IT that, listen, we're going to talk about this when the time comes. Okay? But at the same time, I need a mechanism to estimate. So, okay, we're going to talk about it, but dude, tell me a little more, right? I mean, I need to know a little more about this so I can give you an estimate. Because here's the thing. If I were to tell you, estimate this story, What do you guys think? Small, medium, large, X large? What do you think? Come on.
Small.
Small, okay. So how do we know? We have this thing called acceptance tests or acceptance criteria. So on the back of the index card, you want to sort of write, okay, so as an online customer, I want to view the menu, okay. How do I know I'm done with this story? Well, I need to verify that each menu item has a name, okay, has a description, and has a price. Yeah, okay, that's small, right? Now, what if I add something that said, verify that all menu items are categorized? Still small? What do you guys think? Yeah? Maybe? Verify that each menu item has nutritional information. Are we getting bigger? Okay. Verify that specials are marked in a special way. Verify that each menu item has a picture. Verify that each menu item has reviews. Okay, wait, dude. This is no longer small. Right? So what these acceptance criteria do, they tell us, what do you actually want? Okay? Now, notice here, we're not talking about specs still. We're talking about an understanding of what is satisfactory for you as the customer. What do you want? How do you know this thing is done? Okay? So, you can keep going, and this may still be medium in your head, but look at this one. This is going to change everything, right? Verify that only menu items that the kitchen currently has inventory for, right, show up. Now I need a whole different system. So now this story suddenly turned large. And this is why these acceptance criteria are actually quite important, because without them, what happens is you look at this and you give it a small. Now, as we start working together, you say, oh no, I meant that the menu has to be dynamic. Well, you didn't say so, but I meant so. Let it out.
I accept that this is a mechanism for, to me, that's just a requirement stated in a different way.
Sure.
But I also understand that from a philosophical or mindset point of view, getting people thinking about things in the right way rather than getting bedded down into requirements, this is a different way to, and certainly for users, how do I know it's right is an easier question than what's right. But I'd still
versus what are the specs?
Yeah, but I'd still see you could write a spec in that context. I'm not debating right or wrong. But
and I agree with you.
Yeah.
So I'm not in disagreement with you. I think user stories are a form of requirements, right? The key difference is this. And I did my master's in requirements engineering. Requirements need to be detailed, right? They need to be comprehensive. They need to be complete. There's whole techniques around this. The point here is, even with this, I can't get started. There's some more data I need. And we won't get started. If you have a user story that a developer can read and get started on without having a conversation, that's not a good user story. That's the big difference. That a spec is designed so that I can hand it to someone and they can go build it. A user story is designed so that I can hold a space for an item to have a conversation about later down the line, and at the same time, be able to estimate. Right? So it's to predict and protect. It's to predict what my estimate will be so I can give you an answer, right? And at the same time, it's to protect our time commitment and resource commitment. Because if we commit to a small based on these acceptance criteria, then if you add new ones, we're going to welcome the change, but that's a new story.
Would you try valuing any of this in terms of priority?
Not right now.
So you don't consider thin slicing at this point?
Not right now.
Okay.
Well, but here's where I would consider thin slicing. If I look at this story and this is way too big, I would slice it according to tests.
Right.
So there are many different ways of slicing. One is Kano, we talked about.
Yes.
Right? This is another way of slicing. It's using the acceptance tests.
Yes.
So what I did was I said, okay, this view menu, I'm going to slice into 3 different stories. One of them is called view basic menu.
Yeah.
right? That has name, price, and description. The other is called categorized menu with special highlights. And the other is called dynamic menu. Now, this becomes a high priority, this is medium, this is a low.
Yeah.
Totally fine.
Right.
And this is actually how your backlog looks like, right? Your backlog is prioritized, right? And the things that are on top, which are the highest priority, are usually smaller in size than the things that are on bottom, which we'll do in later releases. Why do we leave them big? Why do we need to talk about them now? If we do, that's actually starting more work in progress, right? And the point of work in progress is what we call the last responsible moment, right? You don't want to start on something right now. You want to start on it at the last responsible moment. Because if you start discussing it right now, dude, it may change by the time you get to it. It's like you want the freshest version of the requirements before you actually get started on. Make sense? Now, here's the interesting thing to understand about requirements or user stories or the backlog. It's in a continuous state of what we call progressive elaboration. Okay? So there's this term called progressive elaboration, which means every step of the way I'm refining and gaining more detail. I'm refining and gaining more detail. How? Let's take a look. So when I start my backlog here, when I start writing my backlog, I'm usually just writing user story titles like view menu, maybe a description and a value statement, and maybe some high-level acceptance tests or acceptance criteria, right? So that's all the way up here. Now, when I start estimating, which is my next step right here, I'm going to get more detail. As we discuss estimates of the stories, right, we're going to start understanding more about them. Third is road mapping, okay? So with road mapping, which is down here, we'll still look at missing stories, we'll slice and split some stories, and we'll keep adding acceptance criteria. Because basically, the more detail you find out about stories, you want to capture them as acceptance criteria, okay? When we move into release planning, which is down here, we'll add some more details, okay? Right before the iteration, the value team is going to go prep more details about the story. That's great, that's fine. So we find out here screen designs and wireframes and business rules and other implementation details. We're going to get all this, right? I mean, you can't start working just based on view menu. There's a lot of other details, but we elaborate progressively on them. Make sense? Yep. All the way down to, right, the first step of the iteration, we'll have our technical tasks, our exploratory tests, and all that kind of good stuff. Now, let's practice a little bit. And this is nothing without practice. So you guys ready to practice? Okay. So let's take our typical example, the sandwich shop. Okay? So what I want you guys to do is just brainstorm the titles of the stories. Okay? Now, I'll show you an example. Let's take a typical point of sale system at a supermarket or wherever, right? If you were to capture the story titles for that, what would we start with? Like, imagine a cashier or something, right? And we're talking about the point of sale. What's the first step here?
Identify the goods. Identify the goods.
So, scan goods?
Yeah, scan goods, yeah.
What else?
Price goods.
Price goods. Now, notice we're starting with verbs, right? Maybe delete a good. What else?
Calculate totals.
Calc total. Maybe apply coupon, right?
Yeah. Hold order.
Print receipts. Print receipt. You guys get it. And I'm not overanalyzing, I'm not, just tell me the titles. I want you to do the same with Java++. All right? Starting from the online customer, what are they going to do? The sandwich maker, what are they gonna do? And then the delivery guy, what are they gonna do? So give me sort of a full stack of my backlog items, and I just want verb. We have to start with the verb. Cool?